Okay, this is my third video of me reading part 4 of The Ordinary Princess. Okay. She watched the king's long legs disappearing around the clipped yew hedges and sighed. He is a dear, thought the ordinary princess, and I suppose I'm glad he's a king and everything is going to end happily ever after. But I still think that sometimes I shall be just the littlest bit sorry that I wasn't a real kitchen maid, and he wasn't a man of all work. It has been such fun, sighed the ordinary princess, and she wrapped the splendid cloak more closely around her and went back to the attic to fetch Mr. Pemberthy and Peter Aurelius before leaving the castle by the tradesman's entrance to go in search of Nurse Marta. But I think you were a real kitchen maid. That experience is not invalid, it still counts. Very early the next morning, before the sun was up, Peregrine came to Nurse Marta's sister's niece's house to fetch the ordinary princess. Nurse Marta's sister's niece had lent her a clean dress and apron and a pair of buckled shoes. She wrapped herself up in the fur-lined cloak that Peregrine had given her. "Goodbye," said the ordinary princess, kissing Nurse Marta. "Hurry up and come back soon, and don't ever breathe a word about all this, will you?" She tucked Mr. Pemberthy into her apron pocket, and Peter Aurelius perched on her shoulder. "What's that?" asked Peregrine as she helped her into the saddle and saw that she was carrying a bundle under one arm. "It's Clorinda's dress and my old cloak and the cardboard box with my wages in it. I couldn't bear to part with them," said the ordinary princess. Mr. Pemberthy scrambled out of her pocket and sat on the back of her saddle, and Miss Marta waved her handkerchief to them from the window as they rode off down the cobbled streets of Amber to the forest and away to Phantasmarania. There's a shortcut through the forest far away to the city of Fanf in Phantasmarania, and though travelers by the high roads take at least 3 days to get from one kingdom to another, by riding hard all day through the forest, Peregrine and the ordinary princess came to the palace of Fanf by moonrise. They halted their horses at the edge of the trees, and Peregrine helped the ordinary princess to dismount. She was a little stiff from so much riding, and very cold and depressed. "Oh, I wish I was going back with you," said the ordinary princess, holding very tightly to Peregrine's hand. "So do I," said Peregrine, "but don't let's think of that. Let's think of what fun it's going to be when I come and fetch you." He went with her to the foot of the turret wall, where the old twisty stem of the wisteria was just as twisty and knobbly as ever. "You'll have to throw me my bundle when I'm up," said the ordinary princess. "Goodbye, my kitchen maid," said Peregrine. "Goodbye, my darling Amy. The months will simply fly past, and when the spring comes, I will fetch you away." "This is kind of sad." "Goodbye, my man of all work," said the ordinary princess. "Oh, Perry, darling, you will take care of yourself, won't you? And don't let your Aunt Hedwig be horrid to you, and don't let them make you marry any tiresome Persephones instead of me. And promise you won't forget me. And I hope that spring comes quickly, and I do hope I can remember how to climb this thing," said the ordinary princess all in one breath. Then she and Mr. Pemberthy climbed up the wisteria to her turret room, and Peter Aurelius flew up after them. "Catch!" called Peregrine, and he threw up the bundle which was Clorinda's ragged dress, the old cloak, and the cardboard box with the fennings in it. "Spring will be here in no time," called Peregrine, and he blew her a kiss. Then he mounted his horse and, leading the one that the ordinary princess had ridden, turned away in the moonlight and set off into the forest. You can imagine the sensation there was the next morning when the missing princess calmly walked down to breakfast as though she had never been away. Good for you! That is the best entrance. Her royal mamma the queen thought she was seeing a ghost and nearly fainted, and her royal papa the king said, "Bless my soul," so many times that it began to seem as though he would never stop. There's a drawing of them being excited. Look at that, that's so cool. That's awesome. But when all the flurry and excitement had died down, they were so pleased to have her back again that they quite forgot to give her the scolding she deserved, in spite of the fact that she looked, if possible, more ordinary than ever. Certainly she was a good deal thinner, but then she was a little taller too, so that the brocaded gown that she had put on did not fit her very well. "My dearest child," exclaimed the queen, throwing up her hands in horror, "whatever have you been doing to yourself? I declare you have more freckles than ever." "We must do something about them now," said the queen, bustling off to see about ordering extra lemons and more lily lotion. "Bless my soul," said the king for what must have been at least the 50th time. "Well, you may look like a— well, I'm not saying that word, Amy, but I'm exceedingly glad to see you back." "That's good, I'm glad." "Darling daddy," said the ordinary princess, kissing the top of his bald head. "I'm glad too. But no shutting me up in towers and hiring dragons, do you hear? No, no, dear. Not if you don't wish it." "Bless my soul," said the king. After all the excitement of that first day, they all settled back comfortably into their old lives, and things went on just as before, so that the ordinary princess almost began to feel as she had never been away at all. I must have dreamed it. Her mamma the queen tried as hard as ever to make her look more like a real princess, and the council of state, who never seemed to learn by experience, tried as hard as ever to find suitors for her hand. Oh, she can't tell them, right? The Lord High Chamberlain, as an enterprising man, it was he who had suggested the dragon, even went so far as to put forward the name of the Crown Prince Clarence of Kleptomania as a possible husband for the princess. That's the name of the place, really? But that suggestion was turned down, owing to the unfortunate failing of the kleptomanian royal family for absentmindedly pocketing any little trifles that might be laying around. That sucks. Your name is your destiny. And, as the king said, the disgrace of having an unmarried princess in one's family was preferable to having a son-in-law for whose visits one had to lock away the gold plate and chain the spoons and forks to the table. It is quite obvious to me, said the queen in a resigned voice, that Amy will be an old maid. There has never been such a thing in our family before, but it seems we are to have one now. Well. But the queen was wrong. For a week after the runaway princess had returned to her home, the queen came rushing into her turret room in a state of great excitement. In fact, she was so excited that it was some time before she could speak. My child, exclaimed the queen wildly, embracing her youngest daughter. My Amy! She sat down heavily on the ordinary princess's golden bed, on top of the ordinary princess's second-best dress that had been laid out on the coverlet, and fanned herself with a lace handkerchief while the ordinary princess's ladies-in-waiting and maids of honor stood around simply bursting with curiosity. My child, exclaimed the queen once again, getting her breath, put on your nicest dress at once. Do, my dearest Amy, try to look your best. An envoy extraordinary has arrived from His Majesty the King of Amber Geldar to request your hand in marriage. Was there ever such an enchanting piece of news? Cried the queen, quite overwhelmed by this unexpected stroke of good fortune. The king and the whole council had been equally overcome. Do you suppose, dear, said the king nervously, that they'll change their minds when they see Amy? No. Leave that to me, dear, said the queen, and she gave orders that all the lights in the staterooms should be lowered, and that only the very plainest ladies in waiting should be allowed to attend on the ordinary princess. That ought to help, said the queen hopefully. So the ordinary princess was dressed in the most magnificent robes imaginable, and hung with diamonds and amethysts, and made to wear her 4 very best occasions crown, and sent down to meet the envoy extraordinary and his attendants in the throne room, accompanied by the plainest ladies in the palace. Which probably accounts for the fact that the very gorgeous person whom she had last seen standing at the foot of a black staircase in Amber Castle, and was one of the envoy's extraordinary's attendants, never recognized her at all, even though he had stared so hard and so disapprovingly at the little kitchen maid who had been caught talking to the king. Oh my God. The whole reception passed off beautifully, and when it was arranged that the wedding should take place in the last week of April, the queen almost wept with joy. As for the king, he said, bless my soul, 117 separate times, and raised the salaries of the entire palace staff. So the envoy extraordinary went back to Amber Geldar, leaving the court of Phantasmarania quite dazzled with excitement to prepare for the wedding of the 7th princess of the royal house of Fanfaria. But in spite of all the preparations, and the ordering of a most magnificent trousseau, the ordinary princess thought that the winter passed slower than any winter had ever done before. It seemed that spring would never come. Day after day she would sit at her window, looking out at the dark forest where the bare branches of the trees were covered with snow, and wonder if it would ever be green again, or full of birds, or butterflies, and wild flowers. When she was not looking out of the window, she was being fitted for new dresses, or sitting at a desk writing hundreds of thank-you letters for all the wedding presents that kept arriving at the palace. Then she had to sit for her portrait, as her mamma the queen had ordered one from Mynheer van Turpentine, the court painter, to be sent to the king of Amber Geldar, and as nobody dreamed that he had ever seen her, Mynheer van Turpentine was instructed to flatter her as much as possible, which he did. But this isn't in the least bit like me, protested the ordinary princess. Nonsense, dear, said the queen firmly. It is you at your best. Although I will admit that it is not what one would call a speaking likeness, we cannot afford to take any risks. After all, said the queen comfortably, by the time His Majesty sees you himself, it will be too late for him to change his mind. I wonder if she's going to tell her family what happened. And with that, she sailed off to see the arrangements for displaying the wedding presents. The ordinary princess laughed and tried to imagine what Perry would say when he received Mynheer van Turpentine's portrait. Don't get worried, she wrote to him. I haven't really grown like that. My nose is still turned up, and I have as many freckles as ever. Peregrine wrote a very correct letter about the portrait to the queen, but to the ordinary princess he wrote, I've hung the painting in one of the state drawing rooms that I hardly ever have to go into, and when I have to, I only think about how glad I am that you're not a bit like that, and that your nose still turns up and has as many freckles as ever. Darling Amy, don't ever change. That is so romantic, I love it. At last, the snow melted and the air became warmer. Birds began to sing in the forest far away, and on the boughs of the trees tiny buds appeared, and presently the world grew green again. Even early primroses spread gay golden carpets between the gray tree trunks, and it was spring once more. In the last week of April, King Algernon of Amber Geldar, who was also Peregrine the man of all work, came riding into the kingdom of Phantasmarania at the head of a glittering cavalcade of knights, barons, and fair ladies. Into the great throne room at the palace of Fanf, His Majesty King Hildebrand took his youngest daughter by the hand and led her forward to meet the King of Amber Geldar. This is so exciting! My daughter Amethyst, said King Hildebrand, a little flushed by the grandeur of the occasion. Amy, this is Algernon. The ordinary princess tried hard not to giggle as she swept the most beautiful curtsy. She was wearing a magnificent gown with a 10-foot train and really looked quite smothered in jewels. But the King of Abergeldar only saw that among the glittering diamonds and ropes of gleaming pearls, Her Serene and Royal Highness Princess Amethyst Alexandra Augusta Araminta Adelaide Aurelia Anne of Phantasmaria was wearing a little necklace made of acorn cups. I'm so done! Oh my god! His Majesty of Abergeldar replied to the princess's curtsy with the most courtly of bows. He was dressed every bit as magnificently as she was, and looked very kingly indeed. Oh dear, thought the ordinary princess in a panic. He doesn't seem a bit like my Perry. Then the heralds blew a fanfare on their silver trumpets, and King Algernon winked at the princess. Oh, Perry, whispered the ordinary princess under cover of the fanfare. It is you, after all. Of course it's me, whispered Peregrine. But do try and look as though we've only just been introduced this minute. I'll try, giggled the ordinary princess, but I really believe it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Look at them being all a little royal. It's cute. And so the next day they were married in the great cathedral of Fanf by 20 archbishops and with the most magnificent of ceremonies. The ordinary princess wore a wedding dress with a train that was 17 yards long and took 20 pages to carry it. Her 6 lovely sisters, with their husbands and children, all came to the wedding, and so did the old fairy Crustacea, who arrived in a chariot entirely made out of oyster shells and drawn by 100 golden frogs. Her clothes were wetter and more seaweedy than ever, but she was in a remarkably good temper and stayed until quite late. I haven't sent you a wedding present, she said as she kissed the bride, because my presents are not the kind that could be tied up with paper and string. But bend your head, my dear, said the old fairy Crustacea. Then she tapped the ordinary princess, who was now the Queen of Abergeldar, on the forehead with her twisty coral stick. You shall always keep the love of your husband, and the respect and devotion of your subjects, said the old fairy Crustacea. You shall have 4 gallant sons and 2 darling daughters, and you shall live happily all your days. Now that, said Peregrine, is something like a wedding present. So Peregrine and his queen drove away from the palace in a crystal coach, and everyone threw rice and rose petals and satin slippers and waved their hands and their handkerchiefs and cried good wishes. But nobody noticed that the new Queen of Abergeldar took with her a rather untidy brown paper parcel, or that perched among the carvings on the coachman's box sat a little red squirrel and a glossy black crow. And of course everybody thought that the royal bride and bridegroom would spend their honeymoon in one of the bridegroom's many castles. No one guessed that they spent it instead in a little log hut called the Birches on the far side of the forest far away. For the little hut was still standing in spite of the winter storms and snow. The moss was greener than ever, and primroses, wildflowers, and wild cherry brightened all the forest. The ordinary princess, who had once been an ordinary kitchen maid, and was now Queen Amethyst of Abergeldar, wore Clorinda's ragged dress, which she had most carefully mended, and cooked the brown trout that Peregrine, who was always Peregrine, caught in the forest streams for their dinner. Mr. Pemberthy skipped among the branches, and Peter Aurelius called happily to himself from the roof of the Birches. Lavender's blue, sang Peregrine, chopping firewood. Rosemary's green. When I am king, you shall be queen. And so I am, said the ordinary princess. The end. Look at this. Look at it! Sorry. That was fantastic. Oh my god, that's so good. That's so good. I'm going to put a post up about this because I need to know if some of you have read this book and can talk to me about it. Whoa, it's so... I loved it. I loved it.